My name is Eileen Higgins, and I am the County Commissioner for District 5 in Miami-Dade County. There is no regular day, which actually is part of what makes it really fun. Obviously, commission days are pretty regular, right? You got up, you arrive in Government Center, and you work your way through the commission agenda, so that's reasonably predictable. But other days, it can be all over the district. Everything from community meetings. Yesterday morning I was over in Miami Beach. First thing in the morning, talking to residents there at their breakfast club about what we've been doing at the county. And then right from there took the bus over to the State of the City address for the City of Miami, because both Miami Beach and the City of Miami make up the bulk of this district. And then we spent a lot of time, quite frankly, also just out in neighborhood association meetings. Today, for example, I'll be on Flagler Street looking at garbage can installations and also the new trolley shelter installations. So there's no regular day. It's all over, and I just try to make sure that I'm at least in all parts of the district, at least once a week, sometimes twice a week if I can, rather than just sitting in the office. I grew up in New Mexico, and my father was a PhD engineer, and so for the most part, he really gave me one career option, which was to become an engineer. So the world wasn't my oyster. I could be I was going to become an engineer, and I did, and so did my brother, actually. So I went to University of New Mexico, studied mechanical engineering. And then went on to get an MBA, but it was in operations and production management at Cornell. So my first jobs, my professional jobs, were always in manufacturing facilities. I was fortunate enough to work internationally, and so did a lot of global manufacturing work in Europe and Latin America, and so that was very formative of being kind of a young person, 23, 24 to your 30s, and being able to experience all parts of the world and how other people live together and work together. And so started out in manufacturing, but in a big company now through various mergers. It would now be Pfizer. But I moved into general business management, marketing, sales, and sort of got a nice rounded skill set, and eventually over time ended up working in some luxury good products, particularly in the spirits industry. So worked for Seagram, and also worked for a Mexican company, Jose Cuervo, in Mexico and in New York. And then over time, as you get promoted and people think you're really good at things. So I was invited to begin serving on boards and advisory boards of not-for-profits, and got very involved in anti-poverty work through some of these boards. And I began to ask myself the question, like, do I always have to be in the private sector, in the business sector? Can I begin to add more giving back into my work portfolio? And so that led me to become the director of the Peace Corps in Belize, which was really, really a transformational experience to be directly working on poverty alleviation, particularly rural poverty alleviation in this case, a Central American country that is richly diverse. Right? You've got three Mayan languages spoken there, Spanish spoken there, Creole spoken there, Garifuna spoken there, and really working on everything from basic sanitation to unfortunately their HIV/AIDS infection rate was also at over 2% for the country at the time, which is pandemic levels, and subsets of the population at 10%. And then also worked on lots of economic development programs there. And from there, that led me into working for the State Department. And so I was lucky enough to be a U.S. diplomat working in Mexico, and then also in the economic development areas of the Southern Africa region. So I guess my career has kind of been both businessy and public service, and that, I guess, eventually led me to think about running for office here in Miami. And so I always tell people I kind of have a split personality, but there's only two. But I do intend to approach things thinking about, how do we make the economy grow, right? Because I do have that business background, but at the same time, how do we not leave people behind while we're doing that? Because I do think we can do both, and I've had a career that's proven that we could do both. I think, as you know, the county commission salary is $6,000 a year. So the public has been very clear that they intend to keep that salary. I have been fortunate enough, because I have worked in large companies, that I have some savings, right? And so I can afford to do that. And I also have some income that is coming in from our little fitness businesses in New Mexico. So I can afford to decomplicate my life here in Miami-Dade. But there are lots of other commissioners that are raising families. I don't have children, right? So I don't have to save for anybody's college education. They do have to have another income. And so the burden, of course, is on them to make sure that there's never any confusion among their ethics, and I think they do a good job with that. But for me, I was fortunate enough that I could make a clean break so that it was very clear to my constituents that they don't have to even ever ask that question about me here in Miami-Dade. But voters have spoken. They don't want to, they think a $6,000 salary is appropriate, but that means they're going to get commissioners that do have to work. It's just the reality of it. My district, which includes Miami Beach, lots of downtown right here where we are, sort of Shenandoah, and also Little Havana, it's very unique, right? The residents of Little Havana need very different things than some of the people perhaps on Miami Beach. No matter where you are, affordable housing is a big component of it. So that is both a legislative priority and also just a functionally, how do we do that? So in my district, we're fortunate enough that we actually have some big chunks of county land. And so what we're working on now with Director Liu is to make sure that in this district, that land, because we can put out RFPs for this to figure out how we're going to develop that it is really being inclusive as far as multi, how we are making sure that we have individuals, that we have all levels of housing, market rate, workforce housing, and then of course affordable housing. So we've got some spots in downtown that I'm in the middle of working on that, and that should bring probably several hundred new units into fruition. And then of course working in Little Havana with Director Liu, hoping to bring several thousand new units in the coming couple of years. So that is a big priority. I am beginning to explore. I'm not going to tell you of the answers yet, but Little Havana is one of those places where we have the largest amount of naturally occurring affordable housing in the county. But we also have, when you look on a map, many of those houses and small buildings are now owned by LLCs. And so how, in conjunction, does the city and the city of Miami and the county partner to see if we can make sure that we're keeping some of that naturally occurring affordable housing in place, because that area, Little Havana, is very densely populated. It's there are parts of it. There's 40,000 people per square mile. So you would, typically that happens in like Brickell. So we have lots of people that are there, and so the risk of displacement there weighs heavily on me, and so we need to make sure we work collaboratively with the city on those solutions. So we've actually started brainstorming on that. I have a lot to learn still on housing, so you'll have to be patient. I like to do that, but I worry very much about affordable housing there. So that's kind of the top priority. Traffic. We love to complain about traffic. As a matter of fact, it's almost like the weather now. It's a safe if I see you and I don't know you, I don't have to talk about the weather. I could actually talk about, the traffic is terrible. So I think it's our #1 complaint. But deeply when you talk to people and you ask them what they're worried about. Cost of housing is there, and low wages are there. So those things underlying are part of it. I would like to see the county move more aggressively on living wage, and I was pleased to see that in one of my very first meetings we did do some work on moving that with the concessionaires. And I realize we're hamstrung by the state on minimum wage. I certainly think our minimum wage is outrageously low, and I hope the state moves on that. But in the meantime, if I can push forward and we as a commission can come up with any ways to make sure that the workers who are working on our land, like let's remember, it's just not the airport, that is our land. It's my land, it's your land, we own it. And so when we are not making sure that everyone gets a living wage out there, we are further burdening the services that we are forced to provide. So we are letting the private sector not pay, and in the meantime, we, the public sector, those folks are showing up at Jackson Hospital. Well, who pays for that? We do. They're in the lines for affordable housing. Who's paying for that? We are. So those things have to be balanced, and I certainly have met many workers out at the airport who aren't, they get their living wage, they're getting their over $15, but they're not permitted to work more than 30 hours a week. Well, guess what? That's not a living wage. That puts you down in around $11 an hour, which is not our county's living wage. So if we could fill in the Swiss cheese holes in our living wage ordinance, I would love to do that over time and do it thoughtfully while we wait for the state to do the right thing, which is just raise the minimum wage.